I thought I was just visiting my friend's house for the weekend, until his aunt laughed at me and said, "You're blushing already, cute." That was the moment everything changed. I never imagined a simple weekend stay at my friend's house would change the rhythm of my heart. I was 24, fresh out of university, still carrying the restless energy of youth mixed with the uncertainty of what came next. My friend had invited me over, saying it would be good to relax, escape the noise of the city, and just hang out like old times. I agreed, thinking it would be nothing more than a few days of laughter, late-night games, and easy conversation. But the moment I stepped into his home, my assumptions quietly shifted. She appeared at the doorway, wiping her hands on a soft towel as if she had just finished cooking or cleaning. His aunt. Her presence was steady, graceful, and in some way, commanding. She was older, of course, maybe 42, yet the years had given her a beauty that youth couldn't imitate. A kind of elegance that lived in her posture, the way she moved without rush, the calm in her eyes. She smiled at me, and for some reason, I forgot what to do with my own hands. My friend introduced us casually, as if it were the most ordinary thing in the world, but inside me, something stirred. When she extended her hand, I took it, expecting a quick shake. Instead, her palm was warm, her grip gentle, and her gaze met mine without hesitation. That simple contact sent an unexpected heat rising up my neck. I tried to mask it, but she noticed. Her lips curved into a knowing smile, and then came the words that caught me completely off guard, "You're blushing already, cute." Her laughter that followed was light, not mocking, but playful, the kind of laugh that makes you want to smile even if you're embarrassed. My friend didn't seem to notice the exchange, already heading toward the living room, but I stood there for a second too long, caught in the warmth of her presence. In that instant, I felt two things at once, the awkwardness of being seen so easily, and the strange pull of wanting to be seen by her again. The sound of her laugh stayed with me, echoing softly in my mind even as I tried to brush it off. I told myself it was nothing, just a harmless tease. Yet deep down, I knew that one sentence, paired with her amused eyes, had quietly planted a seed. A small shift, so subtle it could almost be ignored, but powerful enough to make me wonder what the rest of the weekend might bring. That evening, the house seemed unusually alive. My friend had disappeared upstairs, lost in a video call, leaving me alone in the kitchen with his aunt. At first, I thought I'd just wait until he came back down, but then the faint hiss of the kettle drew her attention, and suddenly, it was just the two of us in that warm, lamplit space. She moved with the ease of someone who belonged everywhere she stepped. The way she leaned slightly on the counter as the kettle began to whistle made even ordinary movements seem intentional. I offered to help, but she shook her head, smiling faintly. "You're a guest. Sit," she said, her voice calm, almost melodic. I obeyed, settling into a chair, though my nerves made me fidget. The kitchen smelled faintly of lemon and fresh herbs. I watched as she poured steaming water into 2 porcelain cups, her hands steady, her sleeves rolled up just enough to reveal delicate bracelets glinting against her wrist. She handed me a cup, and for a moment, our fingers touched. It was the smallest brush, hardly more than a second, but it was enough. The porcelain was warm, but her skin was warmer. I looked up, only to find her watching me, not with judgment, but with curiosity. "So," she began, taking her seat across from me, "tell me about yourself. What are you doing with your life?" It wasn't the kind of polite question adults usually asked. Her tone carried genuine interest. I stumbled through an answer about finishing school, about not really knowing where I was headed. She didn't laugh or wave it away. Instead, she leaned forward slightly, her elbows resting on the table, her chin supported by her hand. "That uncertainty," she said softly, "isn't weakness. It's freedom. You have the chance to shape something new." Her words stayed with me. I wasn't used to being spoken to like that, not as a kid, not as someone to pat on the shoulder and dismiss, but as an equal. Her eyes stayed locked with mine, unflinching, as if she could read the thoughts I usually kept hidden. When she sipped her tea, she closed her eyes briefly, savoring it, and something in that gesture struck me. She seemed like someone who knew how to linger in moments, to let silence carry its own meaning. I felt myself leaning forward too, drawn closer without realizing it. The conversation wandered from books to places we wanted to see, from silly stories about my friend to quiet admissions of fears neither of us usually shared. Each word pulled me deeper into her world, until the kitchen didn't feel like a kitchen anymore, it felt like a secret space carved just for us. And when she laughed, low and soft, at something I said, I realized I wasn't just hearing her voice. I was memorizing it. The next morning, I tried convincing myself it was all just casual conversation, nothing more. Maybe I had imagined the pull I felt last night, maybe I was just reading into things because I was restless and searching for meaning. That's what I told myself as I walked into the living room, pretending to be calm. But then she entered, and all my careful logic unraveled. She wasn't dressed up, just a soft beige sweater over dark jeans, her hair loosely pinned back, wisps framing her face. Yet there was something about her presence that shifted the air, like a quiet current. She carried herself with that same effortless grace, and when she greeted me, her voice lingered with warmth. I responded too quickly, my words clumsy. My friend, sprawled on the couch, didn't notice anything unusual, but I caught the smallest flicker in her gaze. Our eyes met for a brief second. She smiled, not the kind of smile meant for everyone, but something quieter, almost private. My chest tightened. I forced myself to create distance. I laughed a little louder than necessary at my friend's jokes, kept my body angled toward him, tried not to glance at her across the room. But no matter how hard I tried, I noticed everything. The way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear when she read. The way her hand rested gently on my shoulder when she passed behind me, as though it was the most natural gesture in the world. Each touch, each glance, carried a weight far beyond its simplicity. At one point, she sat at the edge of the room with a book in hand, her posture relaxed. I pretended to focus on the television, yet I could feel her presence more strongly than anything happening on the screen. When I finally dared to glance, she was looking at me, just for a heartbeat, before her eyes dropped back to the page. It wasn't dramatic. No grand gestures, no bold words. Just silences that lingered too long, glances that hovered in the air. Subtle enough to deny, but powerful enough to keep me restless. And so, the day passed with this quiet dance. I stayed close to my friend, but my mind wandered every time she moved. There was a tension between us, invisible, unspoken, but undeniably alive. I realized then that sometimes the most dangerous feelings aren't born in declarations, but in the spaces between words. And in those spaces, she and I were already closer than either of us dared admit. By the time afternoon came, the sky had shifted from a pale blue to a heavy gray. Dark clouds gathered quietly, and soon enough, the first drops of rain tapped against the windows. The sound grew until the entire house seemed wrapped in the steady rhythm of a storm. My friend, never one to resist a nap, retreated upstairs, leaving me in the living room. Alone. Or at least, I thought I was. Then she entered, carrying a small tray with 2 mugs of coffee, the steam rising in curling wisps. "He's already asleep," she said with a light laugh, setting the tray down on the coffee table. Her voice blended with the rain in a way that felt, almost deliberate, like the world had slowed to make space for just the two of us. She settled onto the sofa beside me, not too close, but close enough that I felt the warmth radiating from her body. The scent of coffee mingled with the faint notes of her perfume, something subtle and floral, and the mix of it with the storm outside left me feeling caught in a moment I couldn't name. We talked quietly at first, about nothing in particular. The weather, the rain, the silly habits of my friend. But every word carried more than its surface meaning. When she laughed, she leaned just slightly closer, her shoulder brushing mine for the briefest second. I tried to tell myself it was accidental, but the way my chest tightened betrayed me. Her hand reached for the mug, fingers brushing against mine on the handle. I froze, but she didn't pull away immediately. Instead, her eyes met mine, steady and unreadable, and only then did she lift the cup to her lips. My pulse echoed louder than the rain. For a few seconds, silence filled the room. Only the patter of water against the glass, the faint creak of the old house, and the soft sound of her breathing. I realized how aware I was of every small detail, the way her hair had loosened from its pin, falling gently against her cheek, the warmth of her presence beside me, the tension that seemed to hum between us like an invisible thread. When she laughed again, soft, amused at something I said, she touched my knee lightly, almost absently. It was the smallest gesture, yet it set something alight inside me. I didn't lean closer. She didn't move away. We simply sat there, side by side, the rain cocooning us in a world where silence spoke louder than any words. And in that moment, I began to realize, sometimes intimacy is not in declarations, but in the closeness you don't dare name. That evening, after the storm had passed, the house seemed unusually still. My friend had gone out for a quick errand, leaving just the two of us again. I needed some air, so I stepped outside into the garden. The grass was damp, the scent of rain clinging to everything. A few drops still clung to the leaves, catching what little light remained from the fading sky. I leaned against the wooden railing, trying to steady myself, though my thoughts were restless. I didn't hear her approach, but soon enough, she was there, her shawl loosely draped over her shoulders, the edges fluttering slightly in the cool evening breeze. She stood beside me without a word, her presence both calming and unsettling. For a while, we simply looked out into the garden, the silence stretching, filled with the chirping of crickets and the faint drip of water from the roof. "You look far away," she said softly. I let out a quiet breath, unsure if I should speak. But something in her tone, the gentleness of it, loosened the guard I usually kept up. "I don't know," I admitted. "Sometimes I feel caught between everything I want to be and everything I'm afraid I'll never become." She turned slightly, her eyes searching mine. "That doesn't sound like nothing. It sounds like honesty." Her words sank into me, deeper than I expected. Most people brushed off such confessions, but she didn't. Instead, she leaned against the railing too, her shoulder almost touching mine. She told me about her own fears, how she sometimes wondered if she had missed her chance at certain things, how she worried about being seen as someone who no longer belonged in certain spaces. Hearing that surprised me. To me, she seemed so steady, so composed. But in that moment, she was letting me see the cracks, the vulnerability she usually kept hidden. And strangely, it made her seem even more beautiful. The silence after her words wasn't heavy. It was intimate. I wanted to reach for her hand, to tell her she wasn't wrong to feel that way, that I saw her differently. But instead, I just said, "I don't think you're someone who's missed anything. You're someone who makes others feel seen." She smiled at that, but it wasn't her usual amused smile. It was softer, tinged with something unspoken. She didn't reply right away, but her eyes lingered on mine longer than they should have. The night air wrapped around us, cool and damp, but her closeness made it feel warmer. For the first time, I realized that what bound us wasn't just attraction, it was the quiet recognition of two people daring to be vulnerable with each other. Later that night, the house was almost too quiet. My friend had gone to bed early, leaving me and his aunt still awake. I found myself at the dining table, absently tracing the rim of a glass of water, when she appeared again. Her hair was down now, falling loosely across her shoulders, soft in the dim glow of the single lamp overhead. She carried no tray, no excuse for being there, only herself. She sat across from me, resting her elbows lightly on the table. "Can't sleep?" she asked. I shook my head, a small smile tugging at my lips. "Not really. Too many thoughts." She nodded as if she understood more than I said. For a while, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, though. It was the kind of silence that feels like its own language, steady, thick with meaning. The rain from earlier had left the air cool, and I could hear the faint ticking of a clock in the hallway. Every small sound felt magnified. At some point, her hand drifted across the table, resting close to mine. I didn't know if it was intentional, but my fingers shifted, brushing gently against hers. The contact was so small it could have been accidental, but we both knew it wasn't. I turned my hand slightly, letting my thumb graze over the back of hers. Her skin was warm, delicate, and the gesture felt more intimate than any kiss could have been. Neither of us named it. Neither of us dared. But our eyes met, and in her gaze, I saw a mirror of my own hesitation, my own longing. She laughed softly then, not the playful laugh from before, but something gentler, almost trembling. "You're impossible," she whispered, though her voice carried no reproach. I wanted to say something back, to tell her how she made the air feel different, how I felt both alive and at peace when she was near. But words failed me. Instead, I let my hand rest over hers fully, a quiet confession in the only way I could manage. Her lips parted slightly as though she might speak, but no words came. We sat there, caught in the weight of everything unsaid, two people on opposite sides of a line neither wanted to cross, yet both unwilling to step away. It was not a declaration, not a kiss, not even a promise. But in that silence, in the way her fingers curled slightly beneath mine, it felt like we had already said everything that needed to be said. The weekend passed faster than I expected. Each hour felt stretched with hidden meaning, yet it slipped away too quickly, leaving me restless as Sunday morning arrived. My bag was already packed, resting near the door. My friend joked about how short my visit had been, promising that next time we'd plan something longer. I smiled, agreeing with him, but my mind wasn't really on his words. It was on her. She appeared in the hallway, her steps quiet, her presence as steady as ever. The morning sunlight streamed in from the windows, painting her in a soft glow. She wore a simple blouse and long skirt, nothing elaborate, but there was something about the way she carried herself that made her seem almost timeless. We went through the motions of departure, polite words, casual smiles, but beneath it, a current ran between us, one I knew we both felt. My friend pulled me into a quick hug, his usual easy warmth on display, but when he let go, I realized she was still standing there, waiting. "I'll walk you to the door," she said, her voice gentle. It was such a small gesture, but it carried a weight I couldn't ignore. We stepped outside together, the cool morning air brushing against us. The world was quiet, no rain now, just the distant hum of a neighborhood waking up. She walked beside me slowly, as if stretching those last few steps into something longer. When we reached the doorway, she stopped. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then, without hesitation, her hand slid lightly into mine. It wasn't a long hold, not bold or dramatic, but enough for me to feel the warmth of her palm pressing against mine. My heart stuttered, and I looked at her, unsure of what I'd see. Her smile was soft, tender, carrying more than she could say aloud. "Take care," she whispered, her thumb brushing once across the back of my hand before she let go. The simplicity of it undid me more than any grand gesture could have. I wanted to tell her everything, how much this weekend had shifted something inside me, how her presence had become a quiet anchor I hadn't realized I needed. But the words lodged in my throat, and maybe that was for the best. Some things were meant to live in silence, in the spaces where two people simply knew. She didn't step closer, didn't ask for promises, but the way her eyes lingered on mine told me I would not leave this house unchanged. I gave her a small nod, my own silent confession, and then turned toward the waiting car. As I walked away, I felt the press of her touch still in my hand, as though she had left a mark no distance could erase. It wasn't a love story in the traditional sense, not yet. But it was something real, a quiet awakening, a moment that would echo long after the goodbye. And as the car pulled away, I glanced back once more. She was still standing at the door, framed by sunlight, her shawl drifting in the breeze. Watching. Waiting. Smiling. It was enough.